So this summer with the tornado series, I talked about some pretty extreme and violent weather, but this week, a little bit of a calmer topic.
Okay, good.
Talking about our atmospheric boundary layer, Earth's atmosphere that's closest to Earth, where we all live, and it's usually pretty calm, but sometimes it can impact air quality as well as when thunderstorms form. So you may be surprised to know that Earth's atmosphere extends more than 50 miles up into the sky, but we're focusing within the troposphere of the boundary layer, which is the layer of the atmosphere that's closest to Earth's surface. It's directly impacted by diurnal heating, moisture, and momentum transferring within it from the surface and from the upper atmosphere back down towards the surface. Turbulence is created by friction, so air, wind moving over the land. There's friction happening there, that interface, as well as the sun heating the ground and therefore heating the air directly above it in the boundary layer. So the boundary layer is between about 300 and 1,000 feet thick at night, so it's pretty shallow at night, but then during the day it expands to be about 3,000 to 6,000 feet deep because of more of that daytime heating, more mixing that goes on closest to the ground. So here's a picture from a plane showing the boundary layer that's pretty hazy during a hot summer day, and then fair weather cumulus clouds forming at the top of that boundary layer with then blue sky above the boundary layer's upper bounds. So in the afternoon hours, when conditions are usually relatively calm, fair weather conditions, peak daytime heating is happening during the afternoon. So there's rising circulating air, or what we refer to as eddies. So those are mixing up the boundary layer with vertical motion, rising warm air, condensing and forming clouds, and then cooling sinking air. And again, with the rising air, we can get those fair weather cumulus clouds to form, and you can get some stronger winds at times, some breezier conditions to mix down. But when conditions are around sunrise and sunset, conditions can be pretty calm with the boundary layer because of some interesting processes. So on a clear, quiet evening, the ground is cooling significantly, creating a nocturnal inversion, or when temperatures are increasing with height. So that's a stable layer of the air near the surface, so there's less mixing of that air vertically, and therefore less wind. You also might notice right around or just after sunrise that winds are also pretty calm. So in that morning transition, the sun is just rising, beginning to heat the ground and the air directly above it. The nighttime winds are dying down, and the new daytime mixing has not yet been fully established, so you get those pretty calm winds near the surface, while winds above the boundary layer are still pretty strong. So here's how the boundary layer evolves from day to night. So again, you have that thicker boundary layer with some convection or swirling winds, mixing winds during the daytime, but then at night the boundary layer is very stable and very shallow before it again grows the next day because of that daytime heating and more convection, or the winds that are stirring up the atmosphere and forming some cumulus clouds. So as that solar heating increases, the convection has more energy and can rise higher, warming the boundary layer to its maximum temperature, which determines the height of it. Now, the boundary layer can impact thunderstorm development because it's kind of like a capping stable layer where air can't rise above it unless it is forced to. So increasing dew points in the boundary layer, increasing humidity, can increase our instability in a severe weather situation. So the more humidity we have generally in the far lowest layer of the atmosphere, generally the stronger thunderstorms can get. So a strong capping inversion in the atmosphere just above the boundary layer can inhibit thunderstorm development by preventing warm, moist air in the boundary layer from rising enough to condense and form clouds. However, if there is a trigger, which is sometimes a cold front, or if the boundary layer is heated sufficiently by the end of the day, that stored instability in the lowest layer of the atmosphere can be released, and a strong updraft can be forced through that cap, similar to how steam bursts out of the lid of a boiling pot of water. So here's a couple of schematics of the boundary layer during the day with some of those turbulent swirling motions or turbulent eddies, and then those clouds forming at the top of it, and thunderstorm clouds extending well beyond the boundary layer through the troposphere. So there's a couple reasons why we can get those turbulent winds in that lowest layer of the atmosphere, the boundary layer. So forces are creating chaotic swirling motions that mix heat, moisture, and momentum within the boundary layer, influencing our weather and air quality. So one of the ways we can get those eddies is with mechanical turbulence. So wind shear caused by friction with the Earth's surface, just air flowing over it, and it interacting with obstacles like buildings or trees. Also, thermal turbulence happens because of instability from the sun heating the ground. That's creating rising air blobs or air parcels and thermals when we have those clouds forming and then air sinking as well. So again, we have that kind of mixing of the air during the daytime. But at nighttime, that boundary layer shrinks and impacts air quality. So again, during the daytime, there's lots of room for air pollution to move around and get diluted with those turbulent eddies, but at nighttime, the pollution can get trapped and can't move around as freely. So it's really important to figure out how deep the boundary layer is on any given day. There's a couple ways we can do that. Launching weather balloons gives us that vertical profile of the atmosphere, but data isn't dense enough. We don't launch enough weather balloons in enough locations. So Doppler radar, the entire network across the country, can be used to estimate the top of the boundary layer by detecting changes in moisture and turbulence that occur at its upper boundary using the air's refractive index. So we go from nighttime to daytime, and this is the radar sampling where the top of the boundary layer is. Adding this data to weather forecast models can actually improve their accuracy, and this is a really interesting field of research. Penn State is actually doing some of that, my alma mater, so it's really interesting to see how what happens in that very thin lowest layer of the atmosphere, where we all are, can impact weather, can impact air quality, and all the other layers of the atmosphere where weather happens and where thunderstorms can turn severe.
Okay, we don't want that to happen.
We do not.
Thanks as always, Jacob.
You're welcome.